Hey everybody, it's the Nitty Professor here to pose the eternal question, are Redwing heritage boots romantic? And of course, having asked that, the answer is yes, right? And here's the proof. So here is the chapter called Redwing in my novel. So woohoo, my novel is out. I got some copies of the book, looking great. And Redwing plays something of a not crucial but secondarily interesting role. So I am going to just frame my response to the question I just asked by answering in the affirmative that yes, Redwing heritage boots are romantic. And I think those of you who like boots, which is a number of you, you'll probably enjoy the chapters. The flagship shoe store opened at 11 a.m. on Sunday, right? That's a real thing. The group headed right, checked out some old-time shoemaking equipment. Let's see what else we got. Everyone picked out boots to try. Beckman's, Blacksmith's, Chelsea's, Classic Mocs, etc. So lots of cool stuff in the Ancestor about Redwing. So let's just dig into this a little bit. What makes boots romantic? So let's think about it. So I can even think about my son. If you're watching this, my son, you won't be too surprised. So let's just think of an example. So my son loves boots. Y'all have seen them on my videos. You know this. And why do you love the boots? Well, they're just great. You know, they fit, they work, they're wonderful leather, comfortable, classic, etc., etc. So he's like, my girlfriend has to have a pair of Redwings. So guess what? That was like a big gift, you know, for her to get her the Chelsea, the Claras. He got her the Claras. And she also got him some wonderful shoes, actually from Oak Street. So there's the whole gift exchange idea. But think about it. So, you know, let me ask you this question. Do you ever look at people's footwear? So this is something, of course, as a writer, I'm always observing people because I want my characters to come across as real. A lot of books, here's one of the reasons why I wrote the novels that I've written so far. I keep writing. I read these books and the characters, they just have zero depth and they don't resemble the people in my life. So many of them, right? It's like a real challenge to find a book where you can really relate. I see so many books where all the people are white, all the people are middle-aged, all the people are female, all the people have petty problems. And I stumble upon one where it's like, I can dig into this. The emotions are real, they're raw, they're visceral. Then I'm like, that's, you know, but it just seems like that's a needle in a haystack. So a lot of writers are like, well, why would you write a book? Because that doesn't exist yet and you think it needs to be there. So that's why I write the books that I do. So real characters. So I observe. And lately in my travels, I traveled by air a few times over the summer. And when you're in an airport, what else do you have to do? You know, you gotta stay awake, wait and make sure you know when the gate's gonna be open, if the plane's actually gonna be available, etc., etc. If you really have a seat, you don't want any mishaps, right? So you look at people, and a lot of times I look at their feet, I look at their shoes, and 98.5% of the time I'm disappointed because it's just the same old mesh rubber sole tennis shoe, you know, a Nike here, a New Balance there, no shoe, no shoes, you know, they got their place, but it's like, come on, people, does nobody wear leather anymore? And then when I stumble upon someone, I'm like, whoa, yeah, you know, it's like this point of commonality. So this guy was sitting in front of me, just like one row up across the aisle from me in the plane. I saw his boots. I was like, those are mock toes, they got the crepe sole, they got a little flag on them. I bet those are Thoroughgoods. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, you got pretty good boots there. And he's like, oh yeah, you do too, yo. I said, are those Thoroughgoods? And he said, yes, they are. I know my heritage boots, right? You know, so it's like this connection. It's a connection. And when people enjoy special things, especially if they're kind of unique, right? Like these babies, and you encounter them, you're like, whoa, you know, maybe there's more in common that we have than just the boots. You know, we've already got this central, you know, the slow fashion, the good leather, the good quality footwear, the Americana, etc. Maybe we share more, right? So there's this possible point of attraction, or even just friendship, you know, just like a conversation piece, etc. So another thing that, and I've experienced this, and my son does the same, and I've talked about yarn tourism. There's also boot tourism. So I did the Redwing video in Stockholm. Last year I did a video at Punt in Copenhagen. And it's kind of, common. There are only so many pairs of boots I can house in this place, but sometimes I come home with a pair of boots like these babies right here. So these are, let me get my numbers right, the Dusty Blue, the 8800s, the 8800s. And I think imagining, which, you can kind of gather from what I just read, boot field trip, right? Boot tourism. You share a common interest. Somebody's like, well, let's go check out some really nice boot stores. Even just with my son, it's like this. We went to Nick's together, and I remember that vividly. It was so cool to watch him get sized and to share his interest and care about his feet, and his comfort. We went to the Redwing store in Spokane, and we're like going back and forth what boots would work and the size, and dickering with the salesperson, who actually, as I recall, was a German woman, which is cool. I get to speak a little bit of German with her. But it's an experience, it's like it's this shared thing, this connection that means something. So here's another thing. So why Redwing specifically, right? Redwings are iconic. Redwings, they're like, it's hard to get more American, it's like right in the heartland, Redwing, Minnesota. Plus it's a beautiful town. And I write about the town in my novel. Not a ton of details, but just mentioning, little tidbits and kind of building from there. There are, like, when you go downstairs, as some of you know, in the outlet store, there's so much to pick from. So let's just look at some examples. So these are the 8800s. I'm slowly breaking them in. And for those of you who care to notice, I have not yet excised my goatskin collar from there. It's the first time I haven't got blisters from them. I got like a ring around my ankle, so we'll see if I can break those babies in. But these, just one example. Here's another really cute pair, kind of a little bit smaller boot. I almost want to call these a bootie. And I don't own myself any of the women's models, but they're getting more and more of those, which, yay, Redwing, glad y'all are doing that. These are the 8062. This is a Hawthorne muleskin leather in the Merchants. Really cute boots, lots of variety, fun to go to the outlet store there and see what they got. Here's another great pair of boots. Look at this variety. These are the Iron Rangers in the copper, rough and tough. Again, so iconic. Number on these is 8086, the 8086s. Nice leather laces. Just another great example of the variety of Redwing heritage boots. Here we have the Linemans, the 2937s. I did get these in the outlet store, and they're breaking them really nicely. Been starting to get some pretty good use out of these. Really enjoying them. And again, they have a different look, but they also have a lot of history and shared interest. My son is like, I'd like Lyman boots. I'm like, you should get them. Here we have the 4331s. The Writer's Room collab with the Chemigum sole in the black. They're basically an Iron Ranger with some specific different features. Another example of Redwing's variety, how much fun it is to shop in the outlet store or in their store in general. And here we have the classic Mocs, the 1907s in the copper rub and tough. So there's just so much to love about Redwing, and it was a lot of fun to write the chapters that take place and to incorporate romance over the idea of boots. And let's face it, so I'm just going to pose this as a question. Y'all know already what I'm going to answer. Are boots sexy? Are heritage boots sexy? Yes, they are sexy. Look at this leather. I mean, you've got the smell. It smells nice. I like this. What is it about? I'm going to have to investigate this. Why is the smell of leather, good leather, from Foot Tannery? Last night I watched a documentary about, now I'm going to forget the name, but it's a city in Bangladesh where they have like the worst possible remnants of animal skins turned into leather. And I was like, I pray I pray I never ran across a leather product from a place like that. I mean, the flies were everywhere. It was gross. Good leather, right? We want quality leather. And I think arguably a lot of the best leather is produced in the US of A. Can you imagine? You can smell this together with your friend. I think my son and I have probably done a little bit of that. Minus the sexy question, but you know, maybe him and his girlfriend, right? They could get her Claras. If they're listening to this, they're probably laughing out loud. And they could get his Nicks and they could have a little smell party. And, you know, this is, I think these dusty blues is kind of a sexy color, you know? It's like, this is so unique. It's a beautiful color. And the texture, there's a lot of sensual, tactile kind of experience that we can enjoy from leather. And just the break-in process, it's such an accomplishment. Just, it feels good, you know what I'm saying? Good leather feels good. This is a beautiful leather. And it's supple, you know, it's supple. I think there's something about leather that brings us back to our animal roots, you know? And just the shape of these boots. These boots are really cute. They're kind of minimalist, and they don't invite excess attention to themselves. There's no overt branding to them. I think they, you know, they make the person who's in the boots look good. So I think there's a lot of room to argue that Redwing heritage boots are not only romantic, but they're also sexy. And for those of you who like boots, I would also like to raise or let's say argue, you know, these are romance novels, but the main character, Jeff, in this novel is a rugged type of guy. He's young, but like his main interest is Rurex exploration. He does YouTube videos on prairie skeletons. In fact, I was going to grab a book of my prairie skeletons that I have. Didn't do it, but there is one on the back of this book for what it's worth. Little prairie skeleton on there. That's the kind of places that Jeff investigates. And, you know, it's kind of a manly sport. In other words, men, if you're rugged type, likes boots, I think there's something in it for you in my novels. There's stuff about the Underground Railroad. There's stuff about the survivalist dimension of knitting and spinning and sheep raising and a lot of cool stuff. So it's a very gender neutral approach to romance. So I think that romance, it's not like the Hallmark, you know, or it's not just women's fiction. So I think there's a lot in there for the guys. Just kind of putting in a plug there. If you do get the book and read it, let me know if you agree or not, you know. But in any case, I would love to know your opinion if you think heritage boots, Redwing specifically, but heritage boots in general, if they've got a romantic dimension to them, if they've got a sexy dimension to them. What are your feelings? Do you agree? And what's your experience? And, you know, have you bonded with someone over your heritage boot love? I hope the answer is yes. I'm going to assume it. You know, two people walking down the street and they both got on beautiful engineer boots. There's got to be a connection there, right? That can't just be like coincidence. So in any case, hope you enjoyed this video. I'll put a link to my author site. I have the Romance with Fiber Gold now as paper book, as an ebook, and I'm not sure when. At some point we'll do an audiobook. Might take a little bit of time, but for now, 2 ways to read it. Let me know what you think. I hope y'all have an awesome rest of your weekend, a great week, and we'll talk soon. Bye.